what does the next 5 years look like for crypto? If you look back at the last 5 years, we've seen such a massive change. Like 2020 was when, COVID was kicking off and we had that massive bull run, and then obviously the black swan events with FTX and Luna, and now we've come back and we're seeing ETF adoption and more regulation and a crypto-friendly president in the US.
I don't know if he let it slip or if it is more general knowledge that he mentioned that they're putting together a recommendation on an accumulation strategy. So the first real snippet I've heard of a government actually putting together a plan on how they're going to buy more. Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of the Tapping Into Crypto podcast with me, Ted. Mate, we're back.
We are back. It's been a while, Pav, so it's good to be back. Just us two sitting down, chopping up.
That's it. A few weeks between chats. We've obviously had some great guests on.
Yep.
I guess a lot has changed, right? Like, it's not like we're coming back and it's business as usual. I feel like things are kicked up a gear.
Yeah, I mean, we should give you a bit of a recap. But first of all, what are we talking about on today's potty?
Well, we thought it'd be pretty cool to dissect a bit of a road to 2030, a bit of a hypothetical situation of where the industry could be going. I know it's been on hot in everyone's lips, got a lot of reform coming, stablecoin legislation just got passed in the US, and we've also got some potential other clarity coming in August as that mandate. I think it's even towards the end of July, you might start to hear the first whispers of what's happening in the US regarding the legislation towards like market making and just the rules of engaging in a crypto market in the US, which obviously, as we know, like crypto agnostic, the US kind of sets the tone for how the rest of the world may also perceive crypto as well. So that's a big deal. And then obviously we want to talk into what we're seeing in the market right now. Like obviously we're seeing Bitcoin get closer and closer to all-time highs, some interesting moves out of the ETF world. Is all-time highs inevitable from here? I think that's just something that'd be good for us to both weigh in on and just sort of give our takes.
Yep. Yeah, it's been about 4 weeks. So we haven't been here to give, regular updates for you guys on the market. But as you said, the Genius bill, which is the stablecoin bill, got passed in the US, which is a pretty major milestone.
Yeah.
It was harder than first expected because, obviously you got to get bipartisan support. And they thought because it was a stablecoin bill, it might be a bit easier because it's pretty straightforward. And then the other interesting piece of news that we weren't able to cover was a Solana ETF launched on the CBOE exchange, and it's actually a staking ETF. Now, the difference to this ETF is it's not a spot ETF like the Bitcoin and Ethereum ones we've talked about at length. But the interesting part is it does include staking, which I think is a world first.
I think that is the first, yeah.
So what it means is obviously if you invest in this ETF, you're going to get the benefits of the Solana staking yield on top. Now, I don't know how that's paid out and whether it just is added to the the value of the ETF, or is it paid out as a dividend? Do you know?
Don't know, but I'd imagine you obviously have dollars, you convert that into units of that financial product, and I'm assuring that the same way you get a dividend, you have the option to either purchase more stock or take a cash settlement. Maybe it's something similar to that, or maybe it just increases the amount of shares that you have in that particular stock. So. Pretty big one, right? Because a lot of people look at the crypto sector and they look at the stock market. I'm sure everyone has that moment where they think, well, why is it worth anything if you can't get a dividend, right? And this kind of is the closest resemblance to that. I think people might start to see that sort of grey line start to disappear a little bit more. Yeah,
potentially. But we'll talk about altcoin ETFs probably in about 5 minutes. But what do you got for us on the overall ETF adoption scene at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's pretty important one to call out, that we are seeing the cumulative assets under management for the Bitcoin and Ethereum as well, ETFs in the US, all-time highs. So we're nearing $50 billion worth of total purchases that have been taken out of supply. And everyone's probably seen those tables of the top holders. A lot of those funds that are doing the ETFs are amongst the top 10 now. So what we're seeing obviously is just adoption. It's there. We go back a year ago, it was $13 billion, the amount being held in just the Bitcoin ETF. Like I said, now it's 49.3. So, that's a 3.5x and a little bit of change. So, it goes to show that, a year from now, are we going to see, it proliferate even further? I think we're all in the camp and boat of saying that probably still early in the adoption cycle phase.
Yeah.
So likely that does go higher if we don't see anything crazy happen from here. To be fair, I think we've seen enough crazy this year already through all the geopolitical unrest, which seem to be settling now, except for Russia, Ukraine, bit of a question mark there still. And obviously all the tariff scares, which, there was a tariff introduced just overnight from President Trump towards car makers in overseas countries like South Korea. So far, the market doesn't seem to care too much. Like I was expecting to be watching to see how the market would digest that news. Doesn't seem too bad so far. So again, if we're seeing all of these sort of risks that are sort of front of mind of what has been plaguing 2025, catching people offside, seeming to go away, that's positive, I think. When we look into the back end of this year, I think it looks really exciting.
Yep. And I guess like we got this chart here that shows like the percentage of spot ETF inflows that makes up as a percentage of the overall Bitcoin spot market. So excluding derivatives, Bitcoin markets and all that. And it's up at around 20-25%. So it's trending upwards, right? So that just goes to show that institutions are buying up more Bitcoin and taking up more market share as a whole of the Bitcoin market. But I guess what does that mean? And then also another question I have is we're sitting at about 105 to 110K for the last sort of couple of weeks and we're getting this good news but why can't we seem to, take that all-time high and take it up to the next level?
I mean, if anyone has that answer, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. But do you have any theories on that?
Well, there's a couple of things I think we've seen recently. Like we've seen, what was it, that massive whale was unloading like 10,000 Bitcoin just in the last 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, so his average buy price was around 78 cents.
Pretty good.
From 2011, and he's just unloaded like tens of thousands of Bitcoin and worth billions of dollars. So he's clearly one of the OGs, one of the early adopters, but now he's cashing in. So yeah, I mean, to your point, like people are... Like a lot of people investing now, we want to see it go to, $1 million plus and almost 10x from here. But people who bought it back then, they don't really care. They're already got $30 billion in the banks and they're unloading. So it is like an interesting one where you've got the people who are really early adopters and they're unloading and they don't really care whether it's 100,000 or 250,000. And then you got people just entering the market who are looking at this as a long-term asset, but we really want to see it take that next level up.
Well, that's it. I mean, if you made 30 bill, how much more could you possibly spend? I'm sure people out there could, but it's obviously a sign that a lot of people are like, hey, look, I saw it go down 80% four or five times. I'm happy to get out now.
Yeah.
Not a bad shout.
Nearing an all-time high.
But that's been a big one. There's also some things happening on the macro front, which, obviously a lot of people may not be looking at, but the US has a key interest rate meeting decision at the end of this month. There's also a few other factors playing into just their whole debt ceiling situation and just their funding mechanism or the plumbing of their finance system sort of coming to a very pivotal point as we head in towards August. So I think even from a macro lens, we could just see risk just in the markets, broadly speaking, just take a downturn on the dial. So, while we're all very bullish, like there is still a situation where we don't see new all-time highs till maybe later on to the back end of this year. Yeah. But yeah, I think there's enough reasons that, if we want to see the next, step and, a new push higher, I think a lot of it is maybe going to come from a lot of these corporates that we're seeing come and add Bitcoin to their balance sheets. Like we've seen, there's just more and more people willing to have the narrative of, hey, we're going to chuck in X amount of our balance sheet into crypto. And that's just happening, right? And I think even strategy stock or priorly MicroStrategy, like that's, edging closer towards all-time highs. So it's looking very, very bullish if you're just looking at the incline at which it's been going up recently. A lot of companies are using that as the proxy to access Bitcoin in the short term as well. So there's obviously a lot of things converging right now, but yeah, it's looking a lot better than what it did 3 months ago. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I suppose like 95% of institutions still don't own Bitcoin, probably even more, probably 99%. So there's so much growth to be had there. I think it's just a matter of, how long does it take before we just see that like wave of them just coming in and saying we need Bitcoin on our balance sheet.
And one more thing, there was like a summit, I think it was about 2 weeks ago. So there is obviously that update coming out from the crypto committee in the US that was set up by President Trump to come out and put forward a recommendation of how to engage and regulate the industry moving forward. One of the committee members, I forget his name, I definitely have posted about him on Twitter, basically in a meeting, I don't know if he let it slip or if it is more general knowledge that, while we've heard of like a strategic reserve and like maybe a rejigging of how assets currently sit to sort of allocate some to Bitcoin, He mentioned that they're putting together a recommendation on an accumulation strategy. So the first real snippet I've heard of a government actually putting together a plan on how they're going to buy more.
This is the US?
This is US.
That's massive.
This is that committee that's, putting forward that this is what we recommend as next steps.
Yeah.
So again, like we haven't really seen material elements of like when people know publicly of what it's going to look like when the US is buying or any other country, to be honest. So I think that's another big factor that could come in at the back end of this year.
That'll be a big one as well, because typically a lot of countries, follow the US's footsteps when it comes to fiscal policy and all that. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see whether countries like Australia say, okay, well, we need some Bitcoin, in our reserve as well, because as I think Andrew McPhee said on the podcast when he was on a couple of weeks ago, like Australia is a fast follower. We consider ourselves a fast follower to the US. We like to make quick decisions based on what they're doing, and so you never know, we could do the same.
Wouldn't be too mad at that.
But look, our next big ticket item on the menu is BONK. Well, like meme coins in general, right? But BONK's been sort of the standout in the last 7 days or so. Can you tell us why that's the case?
Look, I think primarily we are just seeing a general reinvigoration of investors and traders in general, like Bitcoin moving closer to higher, like new highs. A lot of altcoins have been seeing double-digit gains in the last, let's call it 6 weeks or so. And then I know, like I'm just going to call myself out, pat myself in the back, like talked about BONK as like one of the few meme coins actually with some fundamentals behind it, right? And a lot of people probably laugh at that as a comment, but we had our like predictions episode at the end of last year, and I was like sort of very happy and adamant to stick that I do think BONK would be one to watch, and so far it's nice to see it go. But essentially, if everyone's familiar with pump.fun, basically a launchpad service where you're able to start new coins with very little minimal costs. BONK, which has been known for, I guess it's more as a stronger community, I guess you could say, back from the last market cycle sort of bottom that we saw. One of the leading meme coins to really race up as Bitcoin was cruising past 20, then 30,000 US dollars back in 2023. It's just been known to have a very robust community, right? And that's kind of how it started. And what we're seeing now is just that community sort of look at that, what Pump.Fun did, but also just do it within their own ecosystem. So essentially, if you're launching coins, purchasing coins on the Let's BONK, they call it, ecosystem, a portion of that revenue, I believe it's 33%, I could be wrong there, is now being used to buy back BONK tokens and basically take them out of circulation. So I think the latest figure on how much...
Is that a burn mechanism?
It is a burn mechanism, so you can track how much has been burnt so far, and I had a look at it earlier. 1.49 billion tokens have been just dusted, so they're not coming back into circulation.
And so what that means for anyone that doesn't understand is they're getting taken out of circulation, as Pav said, which reduces the overall supply of the token, which is obviously good for, if demand's increasing, price goes up.
That's right. So that's 3.38 million US at current prices. That's just disappeared from being able to be purchased again. So some other key facts is just yesterday, Let's BONK also surpassed Pump.Fun in terms of revenue in the last 24 hours, nearing even Tron, which sits at rank number 8 at the moment. So that was a big call out too, just with the amount of demand that they've been seeing. So obviously, if we're thinking about this burn mechanism exists, people can continue doing what we know they've done in the past. When the market does look favorable, they like to speculate on meme coins and whatever else. You could just see more and more BONK tokens just basically sent into the ether as a part of their burn back revenue scheme. So
interesting.
They've got a few other products that they've got the same sort of mentality. Like there's BONKBot, which is like a Telegram trading bot, which does a similar thing. That was quite popular as well in the last meme coin cycle that we saw. Yep. So it's definitely a team that's pretty switched on. Know the market and how to approach it. So, and I think they've most recently, actually, if you look at their Twitter, they're nearing 1 million on-chain holders. And as a celebration to that, they're looking to burn 1 trillion tokens once they reach that milestone. So again, you've got a couple of converging factors and a marketing team that just doesn't quit. There's some good reasons why BONK right now is sitting at the top of the movers list. It's actually outperformed Bitcoin by 50% in the last 7 days.
It's been ripping. It's been outperforming most of the market, at least like the top 100 coins. But just interestingly, on Pump.Fun, they are set to launch their token this week. So it's got a little bit of hype around that. That will be launching on Gate.io with like a $6 million token, sale goal.
Okay.
So they want to raise $6 million. But I think given the hype around it, they could even surpass that. So
it's been talked about for a long time, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A lot of people in crypto would know the name, and so like it's a fairly recognizable brand, but it's just whether like people see value in the token. I don't actually know what the utility of it is. You could imagine, similar to say like a Uniswap token, where it's just a utility token of an exchange. You can earn yields and whatnot. But it'll be interesting to see how that one performs.
Would be good to see if they, if you really wanted to create some people to like a reason to hold it, obviously give them some sort of like revenue share or something like that. Like if you hold the token and you stake it, then you get something back. But you're right. If there's not much reason for people to hold it, it could be a bit of a buy and get rid of sort of situation.
For sure. Cool. Well, I guess you called it out at the start, and to preface this, so Tommy and I jumped on a panel with the All Things Blockchain event here in Brisbane to talk about the road to 2030. So it was, an hour or so chat where Tommy and I just had a bit of a live podcast, and it was actually a really interesting chat. And I was like, I think it's worth bringing that onto the podcast for our listeners because it's, I think a lot of people want to hear, what does the next 5 years look like for crypto? Like if you look back at the last 5 years, we've seen such a massive change. Like 2020 was when, COVID was kicking off and, everyone was a bit uncertain about crypto. Then we had that massive bull run, and then obviously the the black swan events with FTX and Luna, and now we've come back and we're seeing ETF adoption and more regulation and a crypto-friendly president in the US. And so it's like, what does the next 5 years hold? And I think a big focus for that, even though it might be, a little bit boring, was the marriage between crypto and Wall Street. And when we say Wall Street, we mean, institutional adoption, not just in the US, but worldwide. And what does that look like? So we were talking about like ETFs. Bloomberg has said that they expect a Solana and XRP ETF to be approved this year. So what does that mean for 5 years? Could we see a BONK ETF? Could we see, meme coin ETFs in general? And what does that mean for that category or the market as a whole? Like, do they become more mature? Like, we don't see these 80% drawdowns. Bitcoin, we've seen it is like a lot more stable since the ETFs have come in. So that was an interesting one. Do you think that these altcoin ETFs will see as much adoption or similar sort of adoption to some of those Bitcoin ETFs?
I think you got to ask yourself very simply, do you expect people to be greedy in the future? Yes or no? And if your answer is yes, then I would say 100%. And I'm in that boat, to be honest. We'll see probably what we've seen every time, right? Like markets will start advertising higher prices. People will be like, oh, this crypto thing, I should check it out again finally. And they do what we did and maybe buy it a bit too high, maybe buy it at a good time. There'll be a really diverse outcome, obviously. But I think the one thing, like as you pointed out before, the one thing we've known about the Bitcoin ETF is that we have seen the amount of flows that the ETFs are taking up, it's doubled since October in 2024. It was like 10% of total volume was coming through the ETFs. Now it's like 20%, right? So if we know that the market's getting more used to purchasing through an ETF, kind of tells a pretty telling story that if we do see these more, I guess, you could call it riskier, you could call it more volatile, whatever you want to call it, just more speculative plays on crypto coming to the ETF space. Totally. I think we definitely would see adoption for sure. Yeah.
I would tend to agree, but we do also have the ETH ETFs, which haven't seen nearly the adoption curve that we've seen with Bitcoin. And it just seems like they've been kind of forgotten about a little bit.
I agree with you there. I reckon ETH ETFs like soaring, that's when you kind of, I think it'd be perilous to list an altcoin ETF until ETH gets successful, I feel.
Yeah, but like the SEC has just gone back to the XRP and Solana and Litecoin ETF issuers and said, hey, make these small tweaks to your application, get it back to us before the end of July, and we'll get that approved as quickly as possible. Okay. That's basically what they've said.
Interesting.
So we might see them approved sooner rather than later. So we might not have that opportunity to see the ETH ETFs soar.
Come on, ETH, hurry up.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But other than that, I don't know. Like, I still think we'll see the drawdowns like we always have. Like, until we don't see it, I'm just going to expect it.
Yeah.
It's like us, right? Like, we talk about, I don't know what you're doing right now, but like, we've been obviously DCAing and we've made some larger purchases like a while back. you know, are you going to hold it now that you know these ETFs are here? Like, are you going to watch it go down? Or
Yeah, no, good question. Probably not for the majority of my altcoin holdings. Like even with an ETF, you know, potentially make it more mature. Like Bitcoin for sure, I don't really plan on selling my Bitcoin. But altcoins, yes, I do look at. I am looking to take profit by the end of this year at least.
Yeah.
But the next item we looked at, which was a bit closer to home, was SMSFs and crypto.
Okay.
How we've seen sort of SMSFs adopting crypto more and more this year, even when the market's been relatively quiet. Like SMSFs, it's a different mindset, right? Because
it's long term, right?
It's very long term. It's 10, 20, 30, 40 years for some of these people.
Yeah.
And then I also asked the question, what about super funds? Like most people don't have an SMSF. It's, you know, there are fees, you know, there's a lot of admin into setting it up and all that. Most people just want a super fund. But it's like, how long till we see some of these super funds include crypto? Now, I know they can't now because it's not a regulated financial asset, but in 5 years' time, who knows?
Well, yeah. And then even if you have half of them offering 1%, boom.
Exactly. And I think like we're going to see 16-year-olds of today, they're going to be 21 in 5 years' time entering the workforce. And we've seen the data shows that like, you know, Gen Zs are more, you know, like they favor crypto more than say some of the older generations. Like millennials like it too, but you know they
see it as more of a serious investment in their
exactly. So you're sort of ushering in that new generation who are saying, "Hey, we want crypto," and if it's a regulated financial asset by then, I think we probably will see that in Australia. So
and as you sort of alluding to, obviously you're going to see people move to different super funds that offer it, and those that don't won't see the flows. So the market's going to tell it what to do.
And at this event, I asked people to put up their hands, you know, saying like, would you like to see Bitcoin in your super fund? And basically 95% of the room put their hand up. Now, keep in mind, people at this event will likely have a vested interest in crypto, so that probably doesn't have a good representation of the entire general population. But even some of SwiftX's data shows like 25-30% of people want crypto in their super fund. So interesting space to watch. And then like the next part we moved on to from that segment was the tech and use cases. We've seen some incredible innovation in the last 5 years, but like what has really found product market fit? And what we mean by that is like the product meets the demand of the market. And we've seen incredible, you know, applications on Web3 and blockchain. We've seen, you know, some blockchain games.
Yeah, we've seen the bad side too, right? Like everyone got NFTs and gaming shoved down their throats in 2021. I can understand why a lot of people are a bit like, ugh.
Yeah, exactly.
But you got to think. You got to think like, further ahead. I feel like is what you're getting at there.
Yeah, but for this, we had a real world focus. Like, what are the applications that are gonna, you know, impact people on an everyday basis? Like the mums and dads who don't care about the token of a certain application. They just, you know, it improves their life somehow. It makes things more efficient or whatever it may be.
Yep.
So the three things we focused on were tokenization of real world assets, which we've talked about a lot this year, crypto-backed loans, and then stable coins. Now, there's a reason I said I'm not selling my Bitcoin, and that was because, you know, there's opportunity to borrow against your Bitcoin in the future, right? Because I don't want to sell my Bitcoin because I see it as a long-term asset in my portfolio. How can I leverage that though? I borrow against it as collateral with, you know, hopefully a low interest rate. I think we're going to see adoption of that, you know, in Australia. We'll talk from like a local lens. In Australia, I think we'll see adoption of that increase significantly over the next 5 years.
Do you see that news out of the US?
No.
So they've already kicked that off. So basically enabling purchasing of like mortgages, backing that with collateral from crypto. So there's a bit of a meme going on that there's like that, what is it? The Big Short, like where that Jared Vennett's like stacking towers up. And it's basically saying that the collateral over here is Fartcoin and just pulling the tower out. But yeah, the joke being that obviously meme coins could buy a house. Probably not going to happen, but your more blue chips like your Bitcoin and even stable coins probably could be used as collateral for these mortgages.
Yep, exactly. And like we were talking about stable coins because we said stable coins have found that product market fit. You know, people in developing countries are using them because they're more stable than their own fiat currencies. They're easier to access than say actual US dollars. They're quicker and cheaper to send overseas. Like there's so many benefits to them. I think the interesting part, if you're looking from an investment lens, is like what are the big chains that are going to be adopted for stablecoin transactions? So like stablecoin transactions make up a big bulk of like transactions on blockchain because you don't have that volatility, right?
Yeah.
Are people using Solana, Ethereum, Tron network? Like,
it'd be whatever's tried and tested, right? Like,
yeah.
People want battle-tested networks. That's why I'm a bit dubious on these newer chains popping up. Yeah, It seems like a harder sell.
But I even called out, like, there's no reason as to why, like, these stablecoin issuers like Tether and Circle can't be the next MasterCard and Visa.
Oh, totally.
Like, the regulation's going to play a role in that, but they're getting so big, these companies, and they facilitate so many transactions. So it'll be interesting to see how their role comes about and, you know, if they have too much of a monopoly over the market and what that looks like.
Yeah, true.
And then we talked about real-world tokenization of assets, but we won't get into that because we've...
it's just a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of like if, buts, and maybes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting space to watch. And then, of course, we ended it off with speculation because everyone loves a bit of price speculation.
Price speculation. Yeah.
And I had on, like, we had a little slideshow up on the screen and we had some speculation from notable figures, i.e. Michael Saylor, Cathie Wood, Jack Dorsey, who's former founder of Twitter.
Yep.
Cathie Wood, who's in 21 Shares.
Yep.
And everyone knows Michael Saylor. But Cathie had like a $2.5 million prediction by 2030. Jack had over a million prediction. Michael Saylor has like 21 million by 2046. So he doesn't have a specific prediction by 2030, but just some
specific on 2046, but
yeah, look, I'm sure he's figured out, you know, the compounding interest on that.
Actually, that's probably all it is.
He's smarter than us, I know that for sure.
Yeah.
But look, some really probably inflated predictions there.
Honestly, I like this. Yes, a lot of it's for headlines, but at the same time, you're like, well,
it's nice to hear, right? But realistically, what could we get to? And I know you like looked at some very loose charts and came up with a number so I could highlight it.
Yeah,
but it's like, I think it's a good sort of thing to highlight a bull case and maybe a bear case.
Yeah.
And I think our bull case was about 600 to 800.
And that's still allowing for like a 70% drawdown in the next couple of years. So, yeah.
And then bear case could be anything from, you know, 250 to 300.
Yeah.
But as with all things, can't see into the future. We don't know what's going to happen. So just
crystal ball's still broken.
Yeah, exactly. But I also asked the crowd, like, do we think Ethereum's going to get taken over as the second biggest exchange? And someone called out Tether or like one of the stable coins. And I was like, you were listening.
Yeah, okay.
But interesting. And no one thinks Bitcoin's going to get overtaken, which is probably pretty stock standard, but still interesting to hear that people have so much faith in it.
Yep.
But yeah, I think the next 5 years is going to be massive. You know, we're going to see another Bitcoin halving between them. We're probably going to see regulation come in.
Mate, you'll be in your 30s.
I will be. I'll be in my 30s in like 2 years, mate. I'll be well into my 30s by then.
Yeah, I'll be hitting 40.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's depressing.
Don't want to think about that.
No.
Yeah. But anything to add to that, Pav?
Not really. Like, it's becoming harder and harder to just be an objector to crypto. Like, is kind of my takeaway. Like, I was always on the fence of like, all right, this could go either way. But I feel like we're too far down the adoption curve now to turn it around.
Yeah.
Like, I think it takes something you'd have to break the trust of a system that is not run by anyone, unfortunately, to basically turn it around from here, which, you know, everyone talks about quantum computing.
I was going to say.
But then quantum computing can also break every password of every website.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, if Bitcoin gets
it's the least of your worries.
Compromised, then everything's screwed.
Your bank's screwed, everything's screwed. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think Michael Saylor puts it well when he's like, we're much more likely to see a $1 million Bitcoin at this stage than a $0 Bitcoin. And I was like, he is probably right.
Yep. Again, you have to turn the bus on a lot of things, even like the macro. Like, you'd have to go to a system where money is more valuable over time, not less. And that's just never been the case. So again, it'd be the first time that we went the other way. So it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Interesting.
We don't make the rules.
Yeah. That's very true.
We just buy Bitcoin.
Just makes you think. But 5 years goes so quick. It seems like a long time, but it goes so quick.
Don't you start with me.
Mate, time flies.
It does.
When you're having fun.
No. But it's been, I think we covered a fair bit of ground.
Yeah. So I hope everyone enjoyed the content today. We'll be back next week to discuss more.
Be a bit more hands-on, guys. We won't leave you hanging for too long to keep you up to date. So
absolutely.
I feel like there's a few big weeks ahead. Just I want to personally get through to feel more confident going into the back of this year. So hopefully got some good insights for everyone to come
Yep.
coming weeks.
Thank you, guys. See you next week.
Thank you.